Every weekday for 12 years, Harold Crick brushed his teeth, his 32 teeth, 76 times. Every weekday for 12 years, he would run nearly 57 steps every 6 blocks, barely catching his bus. Every weekday for 12 years, Harold reviewed 7,134 tax files for the Internal Revenue Service. Every weekday for 12 years, he took a 45.7-minute lunch break and a 4.3-minute coffee break, timed precisely by his wristwatch. That was, of course, before his wristwatch stopped working. Does this movie clip from the film Stranger Than Fiction resonate with any of you? Perhaps you are a creature of routine like Harold. Maybe you rely on a device like a wristwatch that subtly controls your life. When Harold's wristwatch stops working, he can no longer rely on it to dictate his day. He's forced to find a new way to live. In our High Holy Day liturgy, we read these haunting words. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed, who will live and who will die. Unetana Tokef reminds us that our time on earth is limited. We have no way of knowing who will live and who will die in the year to come. Its words ask us, are we living in a meaningful way with the time that we have left? On this Kol Nidre, I admit, Chatati, I have missed the mark over and over again. I have lived my life according to what I believe other people expect of me, rather than thinking deeply and acting on what I want for myself. But life is too short to be lived in this way, to be lived on autopilot. Watches may stop, but time never does. That's why we must live according to our own internal purpose. In this way, we can live our most meaningful lives. Let's face it, our world can be an unstable and frightening place. Our instinct when things feel overwhelming is to often look outward for distraction, for easy explanations, or even for escape. Sometimes what lies outside of us becomes a justification for ignoring what lies inside of us. Our tradition has a word for this kind of dynamic: slavery. At the beginning of Exodus, we read, V'ya'abdu Mitzrayim et b'nei Yisrael b'farech. The Egyptians enslaved the Israelites with crushing labor. Eventually, God hears their suffering, and we all know how the story goes. Moses leads them to freedom. That's when the real struggle begins. The Israelites are physically freed, but spiritually, they remain enslaved. In one of the Torah's most powerful and heartbreaking moments, the Israelites surrender their freedom before ever they had the chance to live it. Moses descends from Mount Sinai, carrying the 10 Commandments, words meant to guide the people into a new life of responsibility and sacred purpose. But instead of a nation ready to receive its future, he finds a people clinging to their past. They have melted their jewelry and molded a golden calf. The God who freed them from bondage is nowhere in their hearts or in their actions. They've chosen to serve something lifeless, something false. This year, as I studied Torah, I noticed something striking. The Hebrew word for slave, eved, comes from the root avad, meaning to serve. It's the same word used to describe how the people served the golden calf. Even though they were physically free, they remained spiritually enslaved. Torah teaches us that when we serve what is not true to who we are, we become enslaved again and again. Just before Moses dies, he offers the Israelites one final piece of wisdom, a warning and a plea in the Torah portion we will read tomorrow morning, Nitzavim. Once again, the word avad appears as Moses warns the people against reverting to their slave mentality of serving false gods. He says, if your heart turns away and you give no heed, and you are lured into the worship and service, avadatem, of other gods, you shall surely die. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse, uvacharta b'chayim, choose life. Like in our liturgy, life and death, they are placed side by side, not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual one as well. In times of fear, stress, and uncertainty, we too face this choice. We can continue to serve the false idols in our lives, the habits, expectations, and distractions that disconnect us from our true selves, or we can choose differently. We can choose to live with purpose. The 20th century Jewish philosopher Martin Buber provides a structure for this different path, the alignments of our thoughts, speech, and actions. He writes, whoever straightens themselves out regarding all three will find that everything prospers at their hands. Each individual's transformation contributes to the transformation of the world. The essential thing is to begin with oneself. And what happens when we don't? He answers, by our contradiction, by our lie, we foster conflict situations and give them power over us until they enslave us. Buber gives us a roadmap out of internal slavery. When our thoughts, words, and actions align, we begin to live more freely. This is helpful, but not on its own. We also need something to align our thoughts, speech, and actions against. This is where values come in. Dr. Stephen Hayes, in his book, Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, teaches us about the importance of a commitment to values. He writes, to live a valued life is to act in the service of what you value. And he quotes somebody that you might have heard of, Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan said, You've got to serve somebody. The question is who or what will you serve? Hayes defines values as chosen life directions. He identifies 10 domains of value: marriage, parenting, family relationships, friendship, career, education and personal growth, recreation, spirituality, citizenship, physical and mental health. Each domain can be important, but to live purposefully, we must prioritize from within, and then align our thoughts, speech, and actions with these chosen values. I know firsthand this is not an easy task. Earlier, I confessed, chatati. I deeply value my marriage and relationships with other family and friends. Yet this hasn't always been reflected in my words or my actions. I have a habit of working an entire day at the synagogue and then coming home, only to continue working late into the night. When I do this, I'm prioritizing my career without leaving room for my wife or the other people in my life that I love. And like many of you, I've felt overwhelmed by the state of the world. The human instinct then is to distract, find an easy explanation, or even look for an escape. Amidst the constant barrage of bad news in our country and in the world, my wife and I kept wanting to delay having a child. We asked, how can we bring a child into this broken world? Let's ignore the ticking of time and wait until things get a little better. Eventually, though, we realized, what if things don't get a little better? We decided we cannot let the news or our careers get in the way of our desire to be parents. And so, as many of you know, we are expecting our first child in January. We feel incredibly blessed and cannot wait to begin this new path in our lives as parents, following one of the values that both of us have had for a very long time. Now, returning to our High Holy Day liturgy, I want to suggest that Unetana Tokef offers both a rationale and a guide for living with purpose. After listing all the terrifying uncertainties of life, who will live and who will die, who by fire and who by water, who by plague and who by sword, this prayer proclaims something astonishing. Uteshuvah, utefilah, utzedakah, ma'avirin et roah ha-gezerah. But repentance, prayer, and righteous giving can transcend the harshness of the decree. The prayer does not promise that we can prevent suffering. It doesn't claim we can undo what life brings, but it tells us this: we are not powerless. We are not victims of fate. We can transcend the decree, not by changing the world around us, but changing how we meet it. This teaching finds a profound parallel in the words of Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, author of Man's Search for Meaning. In it, he writes, quoting philosopher Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Frankl believed that even in the most unimaginable suffering, a person with purpose, a clear why, could endure. This, I believe, is exactly what Unetane Tokef is trying to tell us. With this in mind, let me now explain how teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah are a Jewish guide for creating a powerful why. Teshuvah, or return. This invites us to clarify our deepest values, to ask, what am I really living for? Tefillah, or prayer, is about alignment. Most people think tefillah means prayer. That's the way that we use it, but when we break down the actual Hebrew root, lahit palel, it can actually mean to judge oneself. Often we think of judging ourselves as a negative, but in this case, when we evaluate ourselves, especially on a regular basis, we can ask ourselves the question, do my thoughts, words, and actions align and reflect my deepest values? And finally, tzedakah, righteous giving. This is where internal purpose meets the outside world. How can I use my purpose to bring goodness into the world? Together, these three practices offer a spiritual framework for finding and fine-tuning our sense of purpose. Frankl taught that a deep purpose, a strong why, could give us the strength to endure almost any circumstance. Unetane Tokef ritually embodies this rationale through our High Holy Day liturgy, and then shows us how to find that why, evaluate it, and finally use it to impact the world. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks offered his own definition of purpose. In doing so, he clarifies that purpose is not only about us as individuals, but also about the greater world, as the tzedakah leg of Unetane Tokef suggests. He says, what you want to do meets what needs to be done. What you want to do meets what needs to be done. This idea of purpose encompasses everything we've explored tonight and reminds us that while we begin with the self, we don't end with the self. When we have thoroughly aligned our being using our top values, we can begin to see how our purpose will help heal our broken world. There's something unique in each of our lives' purposes that can and will make a difference. We don't ignore the issues of our world that keep us up at night. Rather, we approach them through our own individual why. For 12 years, Harold Crick was enslaved by his wristwatch. His life was mundane and devoid of purpose. But when that wristwatch stops working, something changes. He's forced to ask, what do I actually want? On that day, or in that moment, he also learns something else that is shocking. He's the protagonist in a novel being written by a well-known author, and he is fated to die at the end of her story. Faced with the knowledge of his mortality, Harold begins to live. He lets himself fall in love with a woman who he was sent to audit. He buys a guitar because learning to play had been his oldest, most neglected dream. As he learns to play, something inside of him shifts. With every awkward strum, the narrator says, Harold Crick became stronger in what he was, what he wanted, and why he was alive. Harold's life became one of purpose, no longer mere existence. We all have the potential to make this kind of shift. When our thoughts, speech, and actions become more aligned, and when they reflect the values that we hold most dear, we move from surviving to truly living. Only then can we bridge the gap between what we want to do and what must be done for our world. Kain Yehi Ratzon, may this be our will.